Dear students, living organisms are made up of basic units called as cells. Cell must be something new to you, right? You must be eager to know more about it. So let me tell you the story of discovery of cell. In 1665, Robert Hooke observed a slice of cork made up of bark of oak tree, observed it under the crude microscope. During his discovery, he noticed that the slice of cork has some structures similar to that of the honeycomb. He called that structures as cell. Cell has come from the Latin word called as cella, which means a small room. Initially, he found that cell is just an empty structure and he wasn't able to see internal components of cell. This was because of his low magnifying power microscope. Later, in 1676, Anton von Leeuwenhoek used an improved microscope and concluded that cell is composed of different structures called cell organelles. After confirmation of idea of cell, it was clear that each and every organism is composed of cells. So, we can categorize the living organisms into two categories, unicellular and multicellular. Organisms like amoeba, paramecium, euglena are all unicellular, whereas organisms such as plants, human beings, animals, they all are multicellular. Note that the single cell divides and redivides to form multicellular organisms. Let's understand how do the cells look like. Cells may have different shape and sizes, which reflects the functions of cells. Which, for example, human body consists of various type of cells, which perform different functions. Each cell consists of cell organelles. Cell organelles generally perform various functions, like creating new material in cell, removing waste material out of cell, movement of proteins within the cell, and many more. So here we completed this topic. Variety in cell number, shape, and size. Let us learn that organisms show variety in cell number, shape, and size. There are millions of living organisms found in this earth. However, all living organisms are different from each other in many aspects. For example, they are different in their shapes and sizes. Not only do the organisms vary in shape and size, the cells of different organisms too vary in terms of number, shape, and size. For this, let us compare an amoeba by a human being. You can see that an amoeba is made up of single cell. A human being, on the other hand, is made up of millions of cells. Organisms like amoeba that are made up of only one cell are called as unicellular organisms. A unicellular organism performs all the important life processes using only one cell. Some other examples of unicellular organisms include paramecium, euglena. On the other hand, organisms such as human beings that are made up of more than one cell are called multicellular organisms. A multicellular organism has specialized organ systems to perform different life processes. Some other examples of multicellular organisms include dog and cat. The cells in different organisms not only differ in their numbers but also differ in their shapes. The different cells of one organism has different cells. The shape of any cell is provided by its cell membrane. The cell may be round in shape, for example, fat cells. They can also be spherical, for example, the red blood cells. There are some cells that are long and pointed at both the ends, for example, the muscle cells. Sometimes the cells are quite long, the nerve cell, for example. Not only the shape, the size of the cells also vary. Sometimes the cell is very tiny. Some cells or of the cells are few micrometers. Some cells, on the other hand, are larger in size. These cells are of the size of few centimeters. However, the size of the cell has no relation with the organism in which it is present. A large organism, such as an elephant, has very small cells too. Here are two cells on your screen. Can you tell me which one is a plant cell and which one is an animal cell by merely glancing at them? Don't worry, it's not that difficult. Plant and animal cells can be distinguished from each other by merely looking at them. The presence and absence of few characters are enough to let us know the difference between these cells. Let's go through the differences one by one. If we travel from the outside of the cell to the inner core, then the first difference that we find is the presence and the absence of the cell wall. Plant cells have a proper, well-defined cell wall. On the other hand, animal cells do not have a cell wall at all. They just have the cell membrane, which is also part of the plant cell. It's due to the cell wall that the plant cell obtain their proper, well-defined shape. On the other hand, animal cells do not have a proper shape because they lack in the cell wall. The next obvious difference is the presence of chloroplast in the plant cell. Now this, as we have already studied, is the exclusive organelle of the plant cell. Its absence, and it is absent in the animal cell. Can you help me with the third difference? That's right, the presence of vacuoles. Both plants and animal cell contain vacuoles. However, in plant cell, the vacuole is large and centrally located, whereas in animal cells, there are numerous small-sized vacuoles. The central vacuole can occupy the majority of the cell space, pushing other organelles to the periphery in plant cell. In case of animal cells, it is slightly different. Here, the vacuoles are much smaller in size and they are scattered throughout the cytoplasm. Apart from these, there are several other differences in these two cells. For now, you tell me, is classification of cells done only on this basis? Are there only two types of cells, plant cell and animal cell? Think for a moment. The answer is a definite no. This was just the difference between the plant cell and animal cell. This is not the way the cells are classified. Then how do we classify the cells? Cells are broadly classified into two major types, prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Here are the two types we are referring to. This is a typical prokaryotic cell and this is a eukaryotic cell. Let's begin understanding the difference between the two. To begin with, the name prokaryotic helps us to know its structure. The term pro indicates primitive and the term karyon refers to the kernel, which refers to nucleus in this case. So these cells have a primitive type of nucleus. Well, these cells do not actually have a well-defined nucleus. Can you see these thread-like structures scattered in the cytoplasm? This is nothing but a genetic material mating nucleoid. The nucleoid is analogous to nucleus in our cells. It has strands of DNA, RNA, and it carries the genetic information of the cell. The only difference is the nucleoid does not have a compact shape and mainly lacks a proper membrane. The next obvious difference is the organelles are not membrane bound. That means prokaryotic cells does not have well-defined membranes for the different organelles. On the other hand, the eukaryotic cells, which means cell with a true nucleus, has well-defined membranes for nucleus as well as the other organelles. There are several other features of eukaryotic cell. Tell me one thing. Doesn't this look like an animal cell? Yes, it does. And that's because it is an animal cell. So is animal cell an example of eukaryotic cell? Yes, it is. Both plant and animal cell can be included in the category of eukaryotic cells. So, which cells will be in the prokaryotic type? Cells of lower organisms like various bacteria have prokaryotic